everyone! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. This week we are making little tiny trick or treat bags. This is a real fun little scrap project. I was kind of envisioning these sitting around a dinner table all set for Halloween Eve, and a little place setting for everyone, full of tricks and treats, of course. Or if you've just got a handful of people that come to the door, or maybe you want to give a little something to your coworkers, these little bags are perfect for that. They're also a quick little scrap project. I'm going to show you how to change colors today to make this little one here that looks like a candy corn. So if you want to change colors or mix a bunch of colors together, I'm going to show you how to do that. This one is the same pattern, it's just made using all one color. And of course you can add a little applique like we did here. This is our folk art pumpkin. Just remember you can size down your hook to get a smaller applique if you need to. And I even made one that has sort of a toadstool kind of inspiration. This one used a DK or a lightweight yarn. So you can really have fun with the different yarns in this project, different hook sizes if you need to, even different fibers. It's a total scrap project. These would also make a perfectly sized little trick-or-treat tote bag for the 18-inch doll lovers in your life. So if you or anyone you know loves 18-inch dolls, this is a nice little thing for them to go trick-or-treating with as well. So let's grab our hooks, grab our yarn, we'll head on over to the craft table and we'll stitch it up together. Please visit our shop and purchase a pattern. It helps support our show, and we'll put a link to our shop in the description box down below. Today's tiny treat bag project is really a scrap project, so you can use any fiber yarn you want. I'm using acrylic. I've got a size 4 medium weight yarn here, approximately 24 yards in total. So here's one I made all in black that used around 24 yards of size 4 medium weight yarn. And I made another one which has sort of a toadstool inspiration to it. I used a DK or a size 3 lightweight yarn for this one, so it's a little bit smaller, same hook though, so that'll give you an idea of how they will size depending on the size of the yarn you use. You want a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, a little stitch marker will probably come in handy because we will be working in the round, and we're using a 4.5 millimeter hook. This is also known as a 7. And once you've got all that together, we can get started. I'm going to demonstrate a simple color change in today's tutorial as well, because I'm making a tiny treat bag that has a candy corn inspiration to it, but I'll also explain what to do if you're just making it a solid color. All the bags start with a chain of 8. Once you have 8 chains, you're going to skip the first chain from the hook and single crochet 3 times into the second chain from the hook. Single crochet into each of the next 5 chains. And that'll leave you with 1 chain. You're going to single crochet 3 times into that last chain. And that's going to turn us around so that we work up the underside of those 5 stitches right here. You're going to single crochet into the bottom of each of those 5 stitches. And that is it for row 1. We're not going to join our row here. We are just going to work directly into what was the first single crochet of row 1. So you don't want to confuse it with this little guy here is sort of the chain that we turned on, so it's this little stitch right here. That's the first stitch of row 1. We're going to start in that stitch. We're not joining row 1. So we're going to start with 2 single crochet into that stitch to begin row 2, 2 single crochet into the next stitch, and 2 single crochet into the stitch next to that. So 2 single crochet into the first 3 stitches, single crochet into each of the next 5 stitches, That brings us to the other side of the bottom of the bag. So we're going to single crochet twice into each of these 3 stitches that turn the corner. So 2 single crochet into each of those 3 stitches there. And that will leave us with 5 single crochet left in the row. So 1 single crochet into each of those 5 stitches. And there we are. We're back at the beginning. We are going to work a single crochet into the back loops only for each stitch all the way around. So we're up to a stitch count of 22 stitches. If you want to, at this point, you can start to mark the first stitch in your row with your stitch marker. So this will be maybe a little more visible as you go forward, but it might be really helpful to mark that first stitch after you make it. So the first stitch in the row, we're going to use the back loops only. The back loop is always the loop that's furthest away from you, so you're only using one of the top 2 loops that run across a stitch. So there's my first stitch made. I'm actually just going to clip my stitch marker onto the front loop that I didn't use, just so I know that that's the first stitch of the row. Now I'm going to single crochet into the back loops only of every single stitch all the way around. So I'm still going to have 22 stitches. I'm not changing the stitch count, but this is going to give us just a little bit of definition for the bottom of our bag. So back loop only, single crochet in every stitch all the way around, and I'll catch up with you back at the stitch marker. Here's our marked stitch down here. Remember, I marked the front loop of that first stitch I made, and that's the last stitch, number 22 in row 3. We are going to join this row. So you're going to slip stitch into the full top of that first stitch just to join the row, and that's going to create a nice little bottom ridge for our little tiny treat bag. I'm going to take my stitch marker off, and now we're going to work 2 more rows, I should say, of single crochet. I'm going to chain 1. I am not going to work into the same stitch that I came out of. I'm going to actually single crochet into the next stitch. And to make sure that I don't confuse that little chain 1 with anything when I get back around to it, I'm actually going to mark the chain 1. So this little chain 1, I'm marking a piece of it with my stitch marker so I don't confuse it with a stitch when I get back around to it. That's stitch number 1. 21 more stitches to go in row 4. There are 22 stitches in every row going forward. No increasing, no decreasing. And that's why using that little stitch marker on that first stitch is handy, because it helps keep track of where you are. I've just made my 21st stitch. Number 22 is going to be worked into the false stitch, this little guy down here, just before that. I'm going to take my needle, I should say I'll take my stitch marker off that. That's the chain 1 that we began the row with. I don't want to use that. I'm going to use what we call the false stitch right at its feet. So that's stitch number 22. And now that pretty much covers up that little chain, and I'm going to be working directly into, so if I pull back on it, that's the little chain right there, that little tiny thing. So this is the first real stitch of the row. We're not joining the rows anymore. We're just going to continue to work around and around and around. And of course we're using the whole stitch. We're not using BLO or back loops only anymore. So that was row 4. Row 5, skip over that chain. I marked it with my stitch marker so I knew where it was. Here is stitch number 1 in the row. And just to keep things neat and tidy, I'm going to just mark the front of it. So I'm just marking the front of that stitch. I know that's stitch number 1 in my 5th row. And now I just single crochet regularly in every single stitch all the way around. I'll still have 22 stitches at the end of this row. I'm nearing the end of row 5 now. If you're going to be making a solid colored little treat bag like this guy, then you can just keep single crocheting in each stitch all the way around until the end of row 8. So I'm nearing the end of row 5. You want to do 5 more, or I should say 3 more rows on your own, just single crochet around and around. It does help to indicate that first stitch of the row with a stitch marker, just so you know where you're at. But for those of us who want to change colors, like I'm going to right now, we're going to do a simple little color change, and we're going to try and make it as seamless as possible. So we're going to finish a finished row, I should say stitch number 21. This would be stitch number 22, or the last stitch in my row. So before I finish that, I'm going to start the last stitch of that row of my color change with the current color, and then I'm just going to loop in the new color. So no fancy knots or anything. I'm just going to leave myself, so I'm going to just finish it off with the new color. I'm leaving myself a nice bit of tail so I can weave it in later, and I'm going to snip my yellow yarn and get it out of the way. So now I've switched up the colors. No knots. I'm just going to leave that hanging at the back for now. And I can pull on that just to make sure it's nice and neat and tidy. And that would be stitch number 22. So now into that marked stitch, I'll take my stitch marker out. To make a nice tidy little color change, I'm just going to slip stitch with the new color into the next stitch. Again, for those of you who are not changing color, don't slip stitch, you're just single crocheting in every stitch around. This is just going to help make things a little tidier in terms of color jogging as we go. That done, I'm going to actually single crochet over top of my tails just to kind of make things a little neat and tidy. You can leave them out and weave them in later if you want, but I find this is a nice thing to do. This is now the first stitch of the row. I don't need to mark it with a stitch marker because I can clearly see that it's the new color and therefore the first stitch of the row. So I'm just going to single crochet now in every single stitch all the way around like normal. I'm going to single crochet over top of my tails, and because this is a tiny little project, you really don't have to worry about knots or anything kind of coming undone, especially if your stitching is a little on the tight side like mine. I've just finished stitch number 22. That is row number 6 completed. There's that slip stitch that we made the first stitch of the row with the new color, and we're going to just single crochet directly into it. So I'm single crocheting into it. That is now the first stitch of my new row. This will be row number 7. So I'm just going to mark that, and I'm going to continue to single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. And that little slip stitch that we made is just going to kind of help make it look a little less joggy when we get back around to it. That's row 7 completed. I want to do one more row with this orange. So single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. I've taken my stitch marker out because I can kind of see my little indicator right there where my new row started. So that's easy enough for me now to decide where my rows start and stop. I don't need that stitch marker, but if you still need it, then continue to put that stitch marker on the first stitch of each of your rows. And we've got one more color change to go. I'm just finishing row 8. So that is stitch number 21 I've made, and now I want to change color again. So I've snipped my current color. I'm going to start stitch number 22 with that current color, and then I'm going to loop in the new color, which is white, and finish off row 8 with my final stitch with the new color. Now, for those of you who have been doing a solid color all the way along, you're at the end of row 8, you've finished your last stitch. You're not going to slip stitch into the next stitch like I am, because this is just for those of us who changed colors. So the first stitch of row 9 is a slip stitch if you've changed colors. If you have not, do not slip stitch, just continue to single crochet. So that's stitch number 1 of row 9. We're going to single crochet into each of the next 6 stitches. And then I'm going to put these little tails to the back, and I'm going to weave them in later, because now we're going to separate to make a few handles. So if you lay your little treat bag flat, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches right in pretty much the middle front of your bag here. If you want to shift it one way or another, and maybe you've finished and you're a bit too around the corner, just single crochet up until you've identified those 5 middle stitches in the front of your bag. We're going to chain 5, skip the next 5, and then single crochet into the next stitch. So this is us separating for a little handle, and you want to do that across the middle 5 stitches. So if you were way back here, just single crochet up until you've identified those middle 5 stitches. Either way, once you've done the first handle, that's stitch number 1. You're going to single crochet into each of the next 5 stitches, and that will turn us around the corner. And that will leave us with 5 stitches left to skip. And again, if you want to kind of bring it forward a little bit, maybe these are the 5 stitches you want to skip. It's entirely up to you. This is a little scrap project after all. So if your counts are a bit off or your rows are a bit off, don't worry. Just find the middle 5 stitches of the bag. That's the 5 stitches that you want to skip. So we'll chain 5, skip 5, and then single crochet directly into the next stitch. And we've just completed our second little split for a handle. Now all you're going to do is single crochet in every single stitch and chain all the way around. So just get back around that corner, and then you've got your 5 chains you want to work into. I'm going to weave in all those little short tails later. So make sure you get all 5 of those chains for each of your handles. Don't miss this first stitch when you come off the chains. Crochet around the next bend, and then crochet into each of those 5 chains all the way across your second handle. There we go. Again, don't miss that first stitch when you come off the chains. And that will be probably the beginning / end of that row. Now you've got one more row to do. So row 11 is just single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. Once you finish row 11, work your last stitch directly above the stitches that begin and end each row. Slip stitch into the next stitch to join. That'll just smooth off the top. And then you can fasten off, flip it inside out, and if you've got any tails to weave in, weave them in back and forth on the inside of your bag. So I'm just going to take this white tail and double back with the little end of it, just so it doesn't stick out into my handle. And then I'll take this little guy and I'll weave him in underneath here. I try to do same color to same color, that way the tails really disappear. If you're using a super slippery yarn, make sure you back and forth a few times just so that it doesn't want to come undone. Once you've woven your tails in, you can turn your little bag back right side out. And now this is where I like to sort of shape things. So I want to flatten up that bottom so that it sits nicely. I'm going to pull up on my little handles so that they're sort of accentuated. And this little guy is ready to house some treats. If you're going to add a little applique, finish your bag exactly as we did here, weaving in all your tails, and then you can make a little applique or sew on a button, or if you were going to do like this little guy here, I made some little French knots and I just wove my tail through the back of a few stitches, bring my yarn out with my yarn needle, make a little French knot, and pull it back in again. You could also just do a couple of little flat stitches if you don't want to bother with the embroidery stitches. But that's just a fun and simple way to add a little bit of interest to your treat bags, especially if you've got some scrap yarn lining around. You can also sew on some beads. You could add little bits of felt, whatever you were sort of in the mood for. And then if you're having a fun little dinner party, you can sort of sit these out around the table or put a couple treats in them, and send your gifts off with a little treat bag with a couple of goodies. Little tiny trick or treat bags, perfect for place setting, a little loot bag for your guests as they walk out the door, or even for the 18-inch doll lovers in your life. We hope you enjoyed making this fun little scrap project along with us and are getting ready for Halloween. We will see you soon here on the Jayda and Stitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have a great week. Bye everybody!
Hi everybody, Mr. InStitches here. Thank you for watching today. Here are some of our other videos you might be interested in. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.